The desert stretched endlessly beneath the molten sunrise, its sands shimmering like a sea of fire. A lone rider moved through it, a man cloaked in dust and silence, the rhythmic creak of his saddle the only sound that accompanied him. His name was Cole Avery, a ranger once respected across the territories, now just another shadow wandering the Badlands. The brim of his hat hid eyes that had seen too much, eyes heavy with the kind of regret that no whiskey or prayer could wash clean. His horse stumbled on a rock, tired from days of travel, and Cole murmured a wordless apology as he steadied the reins. He had no destination, only a direction, west toward the place where everything had gone wrong. Once this land had meant purpose to him, the call of duty, the thrill of justice, the brotherhood of those who rode with honor. But that had been before Ethan's fall, before the canyon swallowed his partner whole. Now the sun burned like judgment on his back. The world had gone quiet since that day, and Cole had learned to live with ghosts. Dust swirled around his boots as he dismounted near a dry creek bed. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the faint smell of sage and loneliness. He squatted, tracing faint tracks in the dirt, coyote, rabbit, nothing more. But as he lifted his gaze, something caught his eye atop a distant ridge. A figure, still as stone, framed against the blinding light. He squinted. It wasn't a man. It was a horse, a Mustang mare, wild and proud, her chestnut coat glinting like polished copper beneath the sun. She watched him, ears twitching, tail flicking lazily. There was no fear in her stance, no instinct to flee. She was free in a way he no longer remembered how to be. Cole let out a slow breath, lowering his hand to the grip of his rifle. He didn't aim, habit, nothing more. But the motion made her lift her head sharply, nostrils flaring. Then, with a graceful turn, she bolted, her hooves scattering a shower of sand down the slope. Cole cursed softly under his breath. The sight of her stirred something restless inside him. There was a time he might have chased wild horses for sport, or captured them for the rangers' mounts. But this one felt different. She had looked at him, not past him, not through him, but at him. And for a fleeting second, he'd seen something in those dark, intelligent eyes that he couldn't name. Curiosity? Recognition? A challenge, maybe. He climbed back into the saddle. His horse hesitated, weary, but Cole urged him forward. "Just a look," he muttered. "Ain't got anywhere better to be." The chase began, not fierce, not desperate, but quiet and steady. The mare moved with uncanny grace through the maze of canyons, her path twisting through rock formations, shaped by centuries of wind. Cole followed at a distance, always just far enough to lose her if he blinked. The sun rose higher, baking the ground until heat waves blurred the horizon. Sweat trickled down his neck. Still he pressed on. After hours of pursuit, he reached a narrow ravine where the air grew cooler. The mare had vanished. Cole dismounted, scanning the ground for signs. That was when he noticed it, a boot print in the dust, faint but unmistakable. His chest tightened. No one had been here for years. No one should have been. He crouched low, brushing his fingers over the print. Then he saw something glinting, half buried in sand nearby. He dug it out, a silver badge, tarnished and scratched, the kind once worn by rangers long before the new issue. His heart stumbled. The initials carved on the back froze his breath. E.M. Ethan Moore, his partner. The one he had buried in his nightmares 100 times. Cole straightened slowly, the desert spinning around him. How could this be here? He remembered the day too well, the ambush, the fall, the silence that followed. He had searched the ravine for days, calling Ethan's name until his voice broke. No body, no sign, only the echo of failure. And now, years later, the badge appeared like a message left by the dead. A soft sound pulled his attention upward. The mare stood once more on the ridge, not far above him. She stared down with that same unflinching gaze, mane lifted by the dry wind. Cole felt a shiver crawl along his spine. He whispered, "You brought me here, didn't you?" The mare gave a low snort, stamping the ground once before turning away. The movement sent small stones rolling toward him, as if marking a trail. Against reason, against logic, he followed. She moved ahead with purpose, pausing when he lagged, always just beyond reach. It was as though she wanted him to see something, something he wasn't ready to understand. They traveled until the sky deepened from gold to crimson. When he finally stopped to rest, the mare had vanished again. Cole built a small fire, its glow fragile against the endless dark. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries haunting yet familiar. He sat in silence, staring at Ethan's badge, the firelight flickering across its surface like ghostly movement. Memories came unbidden. Ethan's laugh, their last argument, the promise they'd made to see justice through. Cole clenched the badge in his fist. He'd run from that canyon for years, convinced he was chasing justice when in truth he was fleeing guilt. Maybe this was his punishment, wandering through the desert of his own making. Yet the mare's eyes lingered in his mind. She hadn't looked wild. She'd looked knowing. The wind shifted, scattering sparks from the fire. Cole glanced up sharply. The mare stood at the edge of the firelight, her coat glowing like molten metal beneath the starlit sky. For a long moment neither moved. Then she took a step closer. Cole rose slowly, careful not to startle her. "You don't belong to anyone, do you?" he murmured. "Guess we got that in common." She blinked, ears forward, curious but cautious. Then, as quietly as she'd appeared, she turned and trotted into the darkness. Cole's breath caught as moonlight outlined her path, revealing a faint trail that led toward the distant mountains. He looked down once more at Ethan's badge, then at the empty saddle beside him. He could turn back, pretend this day had never happened. But something deeper than logic spoke to him now, something older than fear. He kicked dirt over the fire, extinguishing it. The desert fell silent again, except for the faint rustle of wind through dry brush. He mounted his horse, adjusting the brim of his hat. His voice, rough with exhaustion but steadied by resolve, broke the stillness. "All right, girl," he said softly, eyes fixed on the trail where the mare had gone. "Let's see where you're taking me." He nudged his horse forward, following the faint glimmer of moonlight on the sand. The night swallowed them both, man and beast, their silhouettes merging with the vast, mysterious horizon. Somewhere ahead, the Mustang's soft whinny echoed through the canyon, an invitation, a promise, or perhaps a warning. Cole didn't know which. But for the first time in years, he felt alive enough to find out. The morning came pale and cold, the desert reborn under a grey sky. Cole awoke stiff from the chill, his hat still tilted across his eyes, the dying embers of last night's fire whispering smoke into the air. His horse grazed nearby, patient and loyal, but the wild mare was gone. Only hoofprints in the sand remained, light, deliberate, moving north. Cole brushed the dust from his coat, pocketed Ethan's badge, and stared at the prints for a long moment. Something inside him, the same instinct that had once kept him alive through ambushes and storms, told him to follow. He rode slow, careful not to lose the tracks. The desert around him seemed to breathe differently now, alive with quiet purpose. Every distant cry of a hawk or shift of wind through the sagebrush felt like part of a greater whisper, one he didn't yet understand. Hours passed. The sun climbed, harsh and merciless, but Cole pressed on, guided by the mare's fading trail. He thought of Ethan as he rode, their first patrol together, the easy laughter, the promises made under the stars. Ethan had been the kind of man who saw light in everything. Cole had been the skeptic, the realist, the one who always looked for an angle. Maybe that was why their partnership worked. Until it didn't. Until the canyon. A shimmer appeared on the horizon, movement brief and graceful. Cole's pulse quickened. The mare was there again, far ahead, pausing beside a rock formation shaped like a broken spire. She turned her head toward him, mane rippling in the wind. Even from this distance, her stance radiated intent. Cole urged his horse forward, but as he neared, she moved again, effortlessly scaling the narrow path between two cliffs. It wasn't a chase anymore. It was a trail. A summons. The climb grew treacherous. Loose shale slid under his boots when he dismounted to lead his horse. The air thinned, filled with the dry scent of minerals and old storms. By midday he reached a plateau, the land spreading out before him like a forgotten world. Red mesas, pale stone arches, and a winding gorge carved by centuries of silence. The mare stood at its edge, looking down. Cole followed her gaze. Far below, faint symbols were carved into the canyon wall, marks that tugged at his memory like an old scar. He knelt, tracing the edge of one symbol with his fingers. It was a ranger's mark, an old code used to signal safe paths or hidden danger. Few remembered it now, but Cole did. Ethan had taught it to him when they were green recruits, years before their final mission. The pattern etched in the rock below was no accident. Someone had left it to be found. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain, though the sky was still clear. Cole looked up at the mare. She seemed to be waiting, muscles tense beneath her copper coat. "You've been here before, haven't you?" he said softly. She flicked her tail, eyes steady on his. He didn't know why he expected an answer, but somehow her silence felt like one. Thunder cracked in the distance. A dark wall of clouds rolled across the horizon, moving fast. Cole glanced toward the gorge. If the storm hit while he was in there, flash floods could drown him before he drew his next breath. He hesitated only a moment. Then he began the descent. Rain arrived hard and sudden, drumming against stone and skin alike. The path turned to mud, the air thick with the smell of wet earth. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the canyon in fierce white flashes. The mare's cry echoed above him, sharp, panicked. Cole looked up to see her trapped on a narrow ledge, rocks crumbling beneath her hooves. Without thinking, he climbed toward her. The wind roared, tearing at his coat. He reached her side as another rockslide broke loose. Dust filled his lungs. She tried to pull free, trembling, wild-eyed. "Easy, girl, easy," he murmured, voice calm against the chaos. He pressed his shoulder under the fallen stones, straining until his muscles screamed. One final shove and the debris gave way. She stumbled free, collapsing against the ridge, her breath ragged but alive. Cole sank to his knees, rain streaking his face, mixing with dirt and blood. The storm raged on, but for a heartbeat, all he could hear was her breathing. He reached out slowly, letting her scent his hand. She didn't flinch. "Guess that makes us even," he whispered. When the rain passed, the canyon glistened like glass. Steam rose from the rocks, curling through the fading light. Cole found shelter beneath an overhang where the mare rested nearby, her head low, sides heaving from exhaustion. He built a small fire from damp brush and sat in silence, watching her. Something about her calm gaze stirred a memory he had buried deep. He saw Ethan again, standing by a campfire, running his hand over the neck of a young mare just like this one. Her name had been Sable. She'd gone missing the night of the ambush. The thought struck Cole like lightning. Could this wild Mustang be her bloodline? Was that why she carried herself with such eerie familiarity? It didn't make sense, but then again, nothing about this day did. He reached into his coat and pulled out Ethan's badge. The firelight danced across its surface. "You always did have a way of sending me back into trouble," he said quietly, half to the memory, half to the horse. The mare lifted her head, ears twitching at the sound of his voice. She stood, stepping closer, her reflection flickering in the flames. Cole held his breath, unsure if she would bolt. But she didn't. Instead, she lowered her head slightly, the way a trained horse might acknowledge a trusted hand. He smiled faintly, a rare crack in the stone of his face. "Sable," he said, testing the name. She blinked once as if accepting it. The fire burned low, shadows stretching long and soft. Cole leaned back against the rock wall, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. He had no plan, no clear reason to keep following this trail. Yet turning back no longer felt possible. The mare had led him to something he needed to see, even if he didn't yet know what it was. When dawn broke again, the canyon floor was misted with fog. Cole packed his gear, feeling a strange steadiness in his chest. He swung into the saddle, Sable trotting ahead without being told. They moved together now, rhythm matching, silence comfortable. The air smelled of renewal, the storm having washed away the dust of yesterday. As the sun rose higher, the fog thinned, revealing a stretch of stone marked with deep engravings. Cole reined in, studying them. They weren't random carvings. They formed a crude map of the region. At the center was a mark shaped like an eye, the same symbol Ethan had drawn in his journal before their last mission. Cole's pulse pounded. This wasn't chance. The mare had been leading him here on purpose. He looked at Sable. She met his gaze steadily, then turned toward a narrow valley to the west. Beyond it, the cliffs curved inward, hiding their secrets beneath shadow. Cole tightened his reins, resolve settling over him like armor. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's finish what we started." He rode after her, the canyon walls closing around them. The world beyond disappeared into silence, leaving only the sound of hooves and wind, and the unspoken promise that whatever waited ahead would change everything he thought he knew about loss, loyalty, and the ghosts of the past. The canyon narrowed into a throat of stone, its walls towering high enough to blot out the morning sun. Cole dismounted, the echo of his boots swallowed by the stillness. Sable halted beside him, nostrils flaring as if she sensed what lay ahead. The air was damp here, cool and ancient, laced with the faint scent of moss and iron. Every instinct told Cole that this place was wrong, that no man should walk where the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. But something stronger than fear pushed him forward, the need for truth, the need to understand why this mare had led him here, and why Ethan's ghost still lingered in the dust between them. They reached a cleft in the rock, half concealed by a curtain of hanging roots. Cole brushed them aside, revealing an opening no wider than a doorway. The faint gleam of metal caught his eye, a rusted chain hanging from an old beam wedged into the stone. It wasn't natural. Someone had built this passage once, long before time buried it. He struck a match, the small flame trembling against the darkness, and ducked inside. The tunnel sloped downward, the floor slick with moisture. Water dripped rhythmically from above, echoing through the narrow passage like a slow heartbeat. Sable followed close behind, hooves clicking softly against the rock. The deeper they went, the thicker the silence became, until even the sound of their breath seemed to belong to another world. Cole's pulse thudded in his ears. He'd been in caves before, tracking fugitives, hiding from gunfire, but never one that felt so alive, so aware of his every movement. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel widened into a cavern. Cole lifted his lantern high, and the light spread across a space vast enough to swallow a town. Stalactites hung like daggers from the ceiling, and beneath them lay a pool of still black water, reflecting the faint flicker of flame. The air smelled faintly of smoke and something else, something human. Cole froze. He wasn't alone. Who's there? His voice echoed across the chamber, brittle and small. For a long moment nothing answered. Then from the far side of the cave came the sound of movement, a shuffling, hesitant step. Cole's hand went to his revolver. The flame in the lantern quivered as a shape emerged from the shadows. It was a man, gaunt and unsteady, his clothes torn to rags, his beard grey and tangled. His eyes, hollow but sharp, blinked against the sudden light. "Cole?" The voice was cracked and disbelieving, like dry leaves underfoot. Cole's hand trembled. He knew that voice. "Ethan?" The man gave a rasping laugh that turned into a cough. "Didn't think I'd see another living soul down here." For a moment the cave seemed to tilt. Cole stared at him, struggling to bridge the years of grief with the impossible sight before him. Ethan Moore, his partner, his brother in arms, alive after all this time. The badge in Cole's pocket felt suddenly heavier. How are you alive?" Ethan leaned against the rock wall, breath shallow. "After the ambush, I fell through a fissure. Landed deep in these tunnels. Broke my leg. Thought I was done for." His eyes drifted toward the darkness behind him. "But I wasn't alone for long. The outlaws, those we were chasing, they used these caves. Stored supplies, maybe the gold too. I found enough to keep breathing. But the exit collapsed in the storm that night. I couldn't get out." Cole's throat tightened. He stepped closer, the lantern trembling in his grip. "You survived here all these years?" "Not years," Ethan murmured. "A lifetime." His gaze shifted toward Sable, who stood quietly at the cave's edge. "She was the first living thing I saw after the cave reopened. Thought she was a ghost." Cole followed his eyes. The mare pawed the ground, restless but calm. Ethan smiled faintly. "She kept coming back. I left food near the entrance when I could. Taught her to recognize a whistle. I figured maybe one day she'd lead someone here. Guess I was right." Cole sank to his knees, overwhelmed. "All this time I thought you were gone." "I carried that weight every day." Ethan's expression softened. "You weren't to blame. I told you to go. You did what you had to." But Cole shook his head. "I left you behind. Then let this be your chance to stop running from that." Ethan's voice was faint but steady. "You came back. That's what matters." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet drip of water. Cole looked around the cavern, noticing shapes half buried in dust. Wooden crates, rusted tools, an overturned lantern. He knelt beside one crate and brushed it open. Gold coins spilled out, their dull glow catching the lantern light. The lost treasure of the outlaw gang, hidden for decades, so the legends were true, Cole murmured. Ethan gave a weary nod. "Worthless now. Greed buried them all. Buried me too." He sank slowly to the ground, his strength waning. "Cole, promise me something. Don't take it. Don't let anyone else find it. Let the past stay buried." Cole hesitated, torn between duty and mercy. "We can report it. Clear your name." "Clear mine," Ethan smiled faintly. "Some debts can't be cleared." Only forgiven. Before Cole could reply, the earth shuddered. A deep rumble rolled through the cavern, shaking loose dust and fragments from above. Sable whinnied, backing away. Cole looked up in alarm. Cracks snaked across the ceiling. "Earthquake," he muttered. "We have to move." He reached for Ethan, but the older man resisted. "Go, Cole, take the mare." "Get out, not without you." Another tremor hit, stronger this time. Rocks splintered from the ceiling, crashing into the water below. The lantern flickered, threatening to die. Cole grabbed Ethan under the shoulders, half dragging him toward the tunnel. Sable stayed close, guiding them through the darkness with uncanny instinct. The roar of collapsing stone chased them, growing louder with every heartbeat. They reached the entrance just as the tunnel behind them caved in completely, sealing the cavern forever. Cole stumbled into the sunlight, gasping for air, Ethan limp in his arms. Dust billowed out behind them like smoke from a dying world. For a long while neither spoke. The sun blazed above, blinding after the long dark. Ethan's skin looked almost translucent in the light, his breath shallow but peaceful. Cole laid him gently against a rock, checking for injuries. Ethan managed a faint smile. "You did it again," he whispered. "Drag me out of hell." "Not alone," Cole said, glancing toward Sable. She stood nearby, coat shining with sweat, eyes bright with life. Ethan followed his gaze. "She led you here." "Maybe she led you to me," Cole nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "She's more than just a horse." Ethan's eyes drifted toward the horizon. "Maybe. Or maybe she's just proof that even the wildest things can carry grace." The wind rose, warm and steady, carrying the scent of sage and sun-baked stone. Cole felt something loosen inside him, a knot that had been there for years. He looked at his partner, at the desert stretching endlessly beyond, and knew the truth at last. The cave, the gold, the years of silence. It had all led here. To forgiveness, Ethan's breathing slowed. "The past doesn't define you, brother," he murmured. "What you do next does." His eyes closed, the faintest smile still lingering. Cole sat beside him, the mare standing watch in quiet reverence. The desert was silent again, but it no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, Cole wasn't haunted by ghosts. He was guided by them. He rose slowly, dusting the dirt from his coat, and turned his gaze westward, where the sun burned low and red across the horizon. Somewhere beyond lay the world he had once left behind, and the man he was ready to become again. Sable neighed softly, stepping closer, as if to remind him the journey wasn't over. Cole reached out, resting his hand against her neck. "Come on, girl," he said quietly. "Let's go home." Together they walked away from the collapsed cave, leaving behind gold, guilt, and the ghosts of the past. Ahead the sky stretched wide and endless, waiting for the next sunrise to begin. The morning after the cave collapse dawned pale and quiet, a thin veil of mist hanging over the desert floor. Cole sat beside the small campfire he'd built from dry mesquite branches, its flickering light reflecting in his tired eyes. The night had been long. Ethan's body now rested beneath a cairn of stones not far from the canyon's mouth, marked only by Cole's old badge laid atop it. He'd wanted to say more, to find the right words to honor the man who had once been his brother, but language seemed too small for what they had shared, and lost. Sable stood tethered nearby, her coat glistening with dew, ears twitching at every distant sound. She had not strayed from him once since they escaped the collapsing cavern. Cole felt her presence like a heartbeat beside his own, a living reminder that survival always came with a cost. As the sun lifted over the horizon, bleeding gold across the desert, he knew what had to come next. The gold buried beneath that mountain was no longer just a secret. It was a danger waiting to be found. And someone someday would come looking. He kicked out the fire, packed his gear, and swung into the saddle. Sable moved easily beneath him, her strength steady despite the exhaustion that clung to them both. They rode west, following the faint trail that wound through the sandstone hills. Each hoofbeat echoed like a drumbeat of memory, stirring the ghosts of his past, the lawman who'd lost his way, the partner who'd died for his mistakes, and the man who now had to choose what legacy to leave behind. By midday, the heat had thickened. Waves of shimmer rolled off the earth, and even the wind had gone still. They crested a ridge and looked down upon a familiar sight. The town of Dry Creek sprawled like a handful of bones against the endless sand. It had been years since Cole had last ridden through its streets, but nothing much had changed. The crooked saloon sign still swung lazily in the breeze. and the church steeple still leaned slightly east, as if bowing under the weight of time. As they descended, heads turned. Conversations stilled. A man like Cole Moore didn't return unnoticed. His name still carried a shadow here, a story of betrayal and loss whispered over poker tables and bar counters. He felt the weight of those stairs but kept riding, straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Amos Keller stood by the doorway, a grizzled man with a grey mustache and eyes that had seen too many lies. He didn't move as Cole dismounted, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "Didn't think I'd see you again," Keller said, voice flat. Cole tipped his hat. "Didn't think I'd ever come back." They stood in silence for a moment, the dust swirling between them. Finally, Keller nodded toward the mare. "That your horse?" "She found me," Cole replied. "Maybe the other way around?" Keller's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you've got something to say, Moore. Best say it." Cole took a slow breath. "I found the old outlaw caves, the ones folks used to whisper about. Ethan's was alive when I found him. He's gone now." The sheriff's weathered face didn't change much, but a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. "Ethan Moore. Thought you two were long dead. So did I." Cole reached into his coat and pulled out a folded map, the edges stained with earth. "There's gold buried deep in those tunnels. A fortune. But the way's collapsed now. If anyone tries digging, they'll die like the others." Keller took the paper but didn't unfold it. "You telling me this out of guilt?" Cole met his gaze. "I'm telling you this because the past has taken enough from this land. Let it rest." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You could have kept that gold for yourself. No one would have known." Cole's expression hardened. "I would have." That answer seemed to settle something between them. Keller tucked the map into his coat, then nodded once. "You'll stay in town?" "For a while," Cole said. "There's some debts that don't pay themselves." He turned and walked back toward Sable. As he placed a hand on her neck, the mare nudged him gently, her breath warm against his arm. For the first time in years, Cole felt the stirrings of peace, fragile but real. He led her toward the livery, the stares of the townsfolk softening as he passed. Some recognized the look in his eyes, the quiet burden of a man trying to make things right. Days passed. Cole kept to himself mostly, fixing fences, helping ranchers mend broken gear, and earning small nods of respect from those who once spoke his name with suspicion. Each evening, he'd ride out to the edge of town, to the place where the desert began to swallow the horizon, and watch the sunset burn the sky to gold. It reminded him of Ethan, of promises buried and kept. One evening, as the wind picked up and the clouds turned bruised with storm, a figure approached from the main road. A young woman no older than 20, riding a dun mare. She pulled up beside him, eyes sharp but kind. "You Cole Moore?" He straightened in the saddle. "Depends who's asking." She reached into her satchel and produced a worn photograph. Two young men in dusty coats standing beside their horses, grinning beneath a wide Texas sky. Cole felt his chest tighten. He hadn't seen that picture since before the ambush. "My father carried this," the girl said softly. "Said the man beside him saved his life once." Cole stared at her, his voice rough. "Ethan was your father," she nodded. "Before he disappeared, he told my mother stories about you. Said if I ever lost my way, I should find the man with the scar on his hand and the horse with fire in her eyes." Sable snorted softly, as if she recognized her own legend. The girl dismounted, her gaze steady. "He's really gone, isn't he?" Cole nodded slowly. "He made it out long enough to see the sun again. He wanted you to know he remembered." Her lips trembled, but she smiled through it. Then he found peace. They stood in silence as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and sage. Lightning flickered across the far ridge, lighting up the desert in brief flashes. Cole felt something stir within him, an understanding that this meeting wasn't coincidence. The past had brought her here, but the future was hers to claim. "You've got his eyes," he said quietly. "And his stubbornness, I'd bet." She smiled faintly. "Guess I'll take that as a compliment." Cole dismounted and offered her a hand. "You heading somewhere?" "Don't know yet," she admitted. "Just riding west. Chasing stories." He looked toward the horizon, then back at her. "Then maybe I'll ride with you for a while." "The trail's better when it's not lonely." She hesitated, then nodded. Together they mounted, turning their horses toward the open desert. Thunder rumbled behind them, but ahead the clouds were breaking, streaks of light pouring through like blessings from a distant world. As they rode, The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was alive, filled with everything left unsaid. The land stretched wide and forgiving, and for the first time in years, Cole felt the promise of redemption, not as a burden, but as a path. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest. The road ahead was uncertain, but it belonged to the living. And as Sable's hooves drummed against the wet earth, Colmore rode forward, not to escape what had been, but to meet what was coming unafraid. The wind carried their laughter away, leaving only the rhythm of hooves fading into the endless west.